want to watch or make a note with your book, I'm going to demonstrate page number 5 first, which is the stabilized seam. Okay, this is, and what they're talking about on, if you have look at knit tops and you see in the shoulder seam that there's some kind of a almost looks like a ribbon or something that they've sewed in that seam to keep this from stretching. Okay, and what you do with sewing that, this is called twill tape. Okay, and that's what I'm going to put in this little shoulder seam, and it keeps any area that you don't want to stretch. Shoulder seams are kind of a bias, so they have a tendency to stretch, especially if it's a knit. And so that's why you'll see it if you look at your garments a little closer in your shoulder seams. They put something in there. It comes different widths, and it comes in black and white. Okay, so here's a, this is a 1/4 inch, and then you've got this size, which is a little wider. It doesn't really matter what size. Here's even more narrow. Okay, just so you're going to catch it in the seam. I have it here, so when you do your samples, you just come up here and cut you a little piece. Here's the black. As I say, it comes in black. You can't see that very well. All right, what I'm going to do, I've got a little, your little seam sample that you have that looks like a front of a garment. And you're going to put your right sides together. Okay, and just like I'm going to sew this seam, I'm going to cut a piece of twill tape. Okay, and it goes right on that seam. And remember, I have all these done in my book here, so if you get confused and don't remember, come up and look. Okay, and then you lay that so it goes right on, right in the middle of where you're going to stitch. Okay, put your needle down, then you've anchored it, and okay, do a little back stitch because you're sewing something together. I'm going to increase my stitch length. Okay, but you just put it right down the middle of your seam. Okay, so you can see now. It's pretty tough to press that seam open. Okay, so you want to finish your seam if you're going to pink it, and then press it to the direction. Then you want to press your seam so it lays down like so. Okay, it's pretty tough to try and press it open because it's, you know, makes it pretty heavy here. So you want to just press it to one direction. Still pink your seam if it's, you know, a cotton. Knits, you don't finish your seams. If you were sewing with a regular machine, if you weren't using a serger, you don't have to finish your seams on knits because they don't ravel. Okay. On a knit now, you might want to just trim this, so it's not, maybe trim it up to the edge of the seam binding. Okay, so that's your stapled seam. Okay, now I'm going to do number sides together. Okay, I'm going to sew my seam wrong sides together. Half stitch. Regular 5/8 seam. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim that top layer. I'm going to trim it half the way off. Just the one layer. Okay. Then I'm going to press this. Okay, see how I've trimmed the one layer? I'm going to press this down flat. Okay, I'm going to press this flat, and then as I'm doing that, once I do that, and I'm also going to press it on the wrong side to make sure I get it right down to the seam, and then I'm going to tuck under, about 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to press it so you've got a fold there. Okay, so I'm going to do that real quick with the iron. Long, but whatever the step is. Anyway, so now, see, I've pressed this. See, I've pressed it under, and now I'm going to sew right on that edge. Notice I hold my threads to the back so they don't pull up underneath as I'm starting to sew. Now I'm going to sew right on that fold that I created. And I noticed some of you, I made comments on your pants to practice or to stitch right on the edge when you're sewing, like when you did your hem on your pants or when you turn down your waistband to sew on the edge. And this is that's what I'm talking about. I don't know if you can see how I sewed. Now the stitch doesn't look as nice, you can't tell the difference, but you want to sew right on that fold as close as you can when you're edge stitching, okay, like on a hem or those areas I was just talking about. But that's the technique that you want to try and learn to do, to be as close to the edge as you can. Okay, so that's a flat felled seam. This is like the seam you see on